guys, hundreds of thousands of people, or over 100,000 people, and according to the news, over 80 tractor trailers are going to be rolling through town this week, headed to not only Blacksburg, Virginia, for one of the biggest events ever on Virginia Tech campus tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's crazy. I heard that the schools are letting out early just to make way for all the traffic heading to Blacksburg.
Yeah, Metallica is going to be on scene on Wednesday night. Actually, if you're listening to this on the day that this comes out, it'll be tonight that Metallica will be in town, taking over Lane Stadium and doing none other than their song that Tech enters in at every game, and the whole place goes nuts to the point that on the Richter scale, it picks up like an earthquake. Yeah. And their Sandman goes crazy.
Which explains why I'm going to be at home.
Yep. Yeah. I was talking with some guys last week that had actually gone up to Montgomery County to get sworn in up there that are officers down this way in the Roanoke Valley who are going to be up there working that concert. And they're all pretty stoked except for the fact that don't know where they're going to be yet. Don't know if they'll get to see anything or where they'll be. But they did say that they talked with a couple people who said that students on campus are pretty upset because they've all already paid for these parking permits they have, and they've all been told they can't park in the lots that they've paid to park in, and the school is going to charge $50 a spot for people to park in at that concert. So isn't that crazy?
You got to make money somehow.
Yeah,
yep.
And that parking was sold out weeks ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was crazy. So
nuts.
Anyway, that probably has nothing to do. In fact, I know it has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but they thought that was interesting considering what day this is going to come out.
Random fact.
Yes. So, guys, let's jump into today's episode. We are starting the first of a two-part series today, and it'll be us sitting around having a conversation around the table today, and then next week we're going to have a guest on joining us, an officer from one of our local agencies here that's going to be joining us for the second half of the discussion.
Why do we have to have a guest? Why do we have to do this?
Wow, man.
This is ridiculous.
Dang.
Well, I think it's because people want to hear from their own instead of us.
Well, whatever.
That's what we're seeing.
Why are we even doing this podcast?
That's what the tribe is communicating.
What is this episode about?
What is this? I mean, you've already given a pretty good layout for what this is going to look like, honestly.
I think we're talking about negativity, how our attitude can affect our altitude.
And let me just tell you, there is no such thing as negativity in police work. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of armed Eeyores.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. And I'll be honest. In fact, the guy that's coming who will be on the next episode, I mentioned to you guys because he and I have been having nonstop conversations about this. Talking about how he is trying so hard to help get rid of this and help the people that he works with realize how important it is to not live like this. But it is rampant in this world.
Negativity is certainly something I think a lot of different populaces struggle with, but for law enforcement, it is very prevalent. There's a culture of negativity, and I've seen men and women really choose to kind of buck against that and change the culture, but by and large, it's just negative. And I think part of it would be just the calls for service are primarily negative. I don't know that I've ever been on a call for service with an officer where they're like, hey, we just called you because we're really thankful for your service.
Yeah.
I appreciate your calling.
Yeah.
Normally it's, I pay your taxes. I need you to do this. I'm the victim here. You need to do it now. And it's all negative. The very existence, you get paid because someone's having a bad day. So that does rub off on you. And then we have turned it, and I am very guilty of this. You turn negativity to a joke. And
yes.
You make it funny.
Yeah.
And I honestly was in a lineup the other day, and I feel kind of sad about this, but the whole lineup went negative. I mean, just straight Eeyore. And it was hilarious. I mean, I was laughing till I was almost crying. And the lieutenant of that lineup said, hey, I don't know that I want to come to work like this. I don't know that I want to get up and leave my family to come into a place of employment where every single thing is not okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to do today is I want to focus on what I can, and I want to walk in positivity. I can control this, and I'm going to do it well. And it wasn't too hard. He didn't single anybody out, but he really set the tone of, yeah, that's a dumpster fire, and I don't want any part of that.
Well, there's probably people already, they're listening to this and they're going, hey, that's just part of the job. Departments, and it doesn't matter what department. I mean, we serve multiple departments, and we've been in, we have gone to serve after critical incidents in multiple departments, well beyond our region. And it really is everywhere. This kind of negative culture is found in so many departments. And I just had a conversation with someone, a member of command staff in one of the departments we serve, and just talking about how, it's kind of always been this way. And I've been around for 16 years now, and several guys who have been retired for years now, that retired shortly after I started, would talk about that. It's just part of life in the departments. And some of the people listening to this are thinking, well, that's just the way it is. But man, I have to believe that we can do something to, I'm not so naive as to believe that we're gonna have this 2-part episode and negativity is going to be gone from our departments from now on. But man, if we could just make a little headway and move that needle just a little bit towards something positive, and maybe squelch some of that negativity, it'd be great.
So let's kind of define that. What's the animal we're talking about with negativity? As we talked about, you do have that dark sense of humor, that laughing at some of the negative things in our world. But negativity in the counseling spectrum, it is referred to as automatic negative tendency. We've all heard that. We've all been in classes where they brought that up. Automatic negative tendency is when you look at a situation and you have a choice to look at part of the good, and you automatically default to seeing everything wrong with it. That's a hard way to live. It is the age old, your glass is always half empty. That's a hard way to live internally with yourself. With every single thing you look at, you only see the bad. In everything in your family, you only see the bad. Everything in yourself, you only see the bad. That's really costly, and it's not actually an appropriate perspective.
Yeah, it is. It drains the life out of you, and it drains the life out of the people around you.
I was going to say that right there.
Right?
Yep.
Or whether it's at home or otherwise. And again, we get it. Part of it's, part of the job. You are looking for the negative things that are going, you're interacting with the negative, you're looking for the negative. But boy, we've got to do something. You got to do something about that, because if you're draining the life out of everyone around you, and it's amazing how contagious, as you alluded to with your comments about the lineup the other day, that if negativity is that contagious, like you are draining the life out of other people, they're draining the life out of you, and it's just going, kind of spiraling downhill, and
it's the easy thing to do.
Yes.
It bottom line, that's the easy way to live life, is to choose to wallow in that negativity. And I tell people frequently, everybody has different talents and abilities, but every single person is given a cup of gasoline and a cup of water that they walk around with every single day. You wake up every morning, you get both of those. And in every conversation, every situation, every project, you get to choose, do I pour gasoline on this or do I put water on it? And I've watched people, they have the opportunity to be neutral or to put out stuff, and they just fuel that negativity. And that's the easy thing to do. And unfortunately, what that does is that does bleed over into your home life. So your home life becomes extremely negative. Every single thing. I talked to somebody the other day that they were going through a horrible, horrible time because of an item that was left on the table. their spouse focused on that one negative instead of everything else good. And they couldn't get past it. There's a cup on the table. That's correct. We hear that frequently, right? Well, they always do this in the car. They always do that. What is that? You're hyper-focusing on the bad things of a relationship or the bad things in a person. And that's the results of negativity.
Well, and you made the comment, you said it bleeds into your home life. I would even go as so far to say is that's the people who are going to get it the worst.
True.
Because those are the people who see us at our lowest point, that's where we let our guard down, right? Yep. That's the place where we don't have to hold it all together anymore. So when we go home, whether it be a spouse or a child or maybe we are living and taking care of a set of parents who are aging, whoever it is, we take that home, and they're the people who see us in those moments that nobody else gets to see us. And, and I even recently shared with a group of people, like you've got to work so hard to be the same person wherever you are as you are the same person as at home. But a lot of times for people who live in negativity, everybody in their world knows that about them. But the people who are the closest to them, the people, again, who are there when they get home, that's who see it at its, I hate to use the term, its finest moments, but when it's really coming unglued, because, again, they're not having to hold themselves together anymore like they do when they're at work or wherever. And unfortunately, in this line of work, I don't know that people who are living in that necessarily even try to hold it together there, because, again, we see how infectious it is and how quickly it spreads, particularly in this world.
Question for you guys. Just thinking about this. Somebody in my circle that it's kind of almost a running joke when we interact with them. I will say there's 100% chance they will complain the entire time we're there. 100% chance. So do you think people see that in themselves? Do you think it's a conscious decision they make? Or do you think they've just developed this attitude and rhythm of every single thing is negative?
I think they just, they've fallen into that pattern, and it just becomes, it's part of their personality, if you will. It's part of their routine. It's just the way they are living life. And I don't think most people set out to be a negative person, but it's, you will do what you have trained yourself to do, right? And you will do what you have habitually, when things become a habit, they become part of who you are, for better or for worse. And so I don't know that it's, once they get into that rhythm, as you said, of negativity, I don't think it's something they necessarily continue to choose. It's at that point they're having to make a conscious effort and decision to do something other than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think for the most part, I think people just, again, develop those habits. I do think, because of a couple of people in my life, I do think there are the rare occasions where there are some people who are so starved for attention that they'll do that just because they know it'll bring attention to them. I don't think, I think what Darren is saying is spot on, because I think the majority of people, they just develop this habit and this rhythm that he described a second ago, and they just live that way. But I think there are the few exceptions to the rules that they seriously are just looking, they want to stay in the middle of attention. They want people in the room to look at them. And so if they find out that as a way they can get it, they'll do it. But again, I definitely don't think I hate to even call it the minority, because I think that's such a small group of people, but I do think that absolutely exists.
I wonder if you're listening to this and you're like, man, am I negative? Am I that person? It is wonderful. And we talked about this on episodes before about having a battle buddy. It would be really nice to go to a battle buddy and say, hey, am I negative? Yeah. Like over the top negative.
Yeah.
We'll call bad. I mean, we don't have to take something that's a terrible situation and whitewash it or pretend that it's good. Bad is bad, but am I over the top with it? And just put your big boy pants on and wait for their response. The other thing maybe we could ask is start reflecting and pray the prayer that David prayed, Lord, if there's anything in my heart that's wicked, know it. And so if there's something inside of me that is negative that I'm not seeing, Lord, would you help me see that? Would you shine a light on that? And then ask yourself, as I'm conversating, was that a positive thing? Was I uplifting? Was I encouraging? Did I give life? Or was I laughing at or relishing in, or was I cutting and sucking the life out of something? And if you continue to ask yourself after you get done speaking, did I do one of those two things? Did I add life or did I suck the life out of something? And if consistently you're saying, man, I sucked the life out of that, or man, I bashed in the negative, that could let you know there needs to be a change.
Yeah, and I've even, now again, you have to be prepared for the answer you might get. But there's certainly times I've asked my wife, questions like that, like how am I around the house? Am I know I'm around a lot of, a few years ago, I'll freely admit I went to a negative place. I had gotten to this, whether you call it a funk or a lull I was just there for a while, a few years ago, because of some things going on and some of what, places we were serving and situations on certain individuals and things. I had gone to a pretty negative place and I, I had to ask my wife and during that time, I had to be prepared to hear the answer, but I've done that when my children were at home.
Yeah.
I've sat down with my kids and asked them, and that various questions along those lines, but that's one of those things. Hey, how do you view me? Do you see me as a positive person or do you see me as a negative person? And you please feel free to answer how you want to answer. Like this isn't a gotcha kind of thing. You're not going to hurt my feelings either way. I just want to hear from you, from your perspective as in my case, my daughters. How do you view me? And, I did this when they were a little bit older, when they were double digits, they're 11, 12, 13 years old and up. I would have those kind of questions and discussions with them. And, I think it's a healthy thing to do, but you do have to be prepared for the answer you might get. It may not be, they might share some things it may be hard to hear.
Well, and let me say this. So, dude, I think that is such good wisdom. And one of the things, like my wife, like we've talked about this a lot because I do value, she's the first one to notice with me, but we've kind of had two agreements when it comes to that. Even if I ask, one is don't tell me on Sundays. I don't want to know on Sundays. Like that's the one day that I don't know that I can necessarily handle.
Explain that.
Do it.
Explain that.
So, for one is for years of being a pastor, when you give and pour out and pour out and pour out and pour out on Sundays, like I just don't have anything emotional left to give. And I'm not in my soul and my mental space is not in a good place to handle something difficult on those days. It just isn't, never was, never has been. But the other thing is like a couple of days ago, from the time this airs, it was a pretty hard day with a pretty tough call. When I have those days, or the days not to have those conversations, or just right when we come in the door from work, like come home, relax, kind of breathe a little bit, but then be ready at some point. Because at some point we got to have those conversations, and with those people, like you said, it is so important, man. It's so wise. Somebody asking your wife, asking your daughters. But if I'm going to be prepared to handle the truth of those answers, and I should be able to get that from them, I need to have those conversations at times when I can take on those answers and be okay.
That's a very good point.
One thing that pretty cool book from Jocko Willink, the great theologian and Navy SEAL. One of his books, he talks about the power of perspective. And I've really looked at that and tried to figure the different perspective of multiple things. But you bring up the negativity, Darren, and probably don't want to open that door for the confidentiality reasons, and it's a little hurtful still. But I don't know, walking beside you through that, I don't know that you had a correct perspective on things. So when you looked at a problem or you looked at whatever, you were looking at it through the lens of extreme negativity. And so that would not be an appropriate way to make decisions. And I think about like when I'm tired, when I've worked a bunch of nights, when stuff breaks in the house, and then there's a decision to be made. That's probably not the best time to make decisions.
Oh, there were absolutely times during that season where I was prepared to pull out of one of the departments we serve and like forget it. And you know, I it was hard for me. There were multiple occasions that I'm like, I'm done. There's plenty of other people and places to serve. Why are we putting up with this and that kind of thing? But again, even in that season that was so dark and so negative, even then I had to take a step back at times and just like, I care about these people. I care about this place, and you know, I can't walk away. But that's the impact of negativity is like, you know, I would have walked away from a place. And when I say a place, I would have walked away from people that I really genuinely cared about because I was just focused on the negative. And Gareth, you were helpful to me during that time, you know, and I know it wasn't an easy time for you either, by any stretch. But it was helpful to have somebody there with me from time to time. Of course, my wife too would, you know, like, you know, you can't pull out now. Like they need you.
No short-term decisions for long-term problems.
Yeah.
So and we stayed the course and we pushed through. We had to, you know, I guess maybe we can transition a little bit in this conversation. Like how do we push through those negative seasons, or if we found, if we've asked our battle buddy or a spouse or whoever's in our inner circle, we've had those conversations and realized, you know, man, I am that negative Nelly. I am that person. We've done some self-evaluation. We've prayed and God has shown that, hey, you are that negative person. Like, how do we begin to turn the tide on that? I think the very first step is what you're talking about. And we can't just even breeze over it. You have to have some intentional reflection.
Yeah.
And you have to ask somebody. You have to ask the question to yourself. You have to ask somebody else. If you're not willing to do that, then I don't think we can talk about anything going forward. I think there has to be that. That is such the foundation. I think after that, you got to go ahead.
Well, something just hit me too is we have to have that awareness of the impact of that negativity on those around us and on us. You know, part of is realizing living that way comes with a cost. There are consequences to being negative and feeding into that negative culture that you might find present at work. That again carries over to other things, but there's a cost. You know, what good is coming out of that negativity?
True.
You know, anyway.
Well, and I was just reading this. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be deceived, because bad company ruins good morals." You know, if you're constantly negative, that's how you live. Not trying to be ugly, but I would say that classifies under the bad company thing that Scripture's talking about, and it tends to ruin the good stuff around you.
Yep.
Well, we're only to say what? Those things that are useful to build each other
Correct.
up, to encourage one another. So it's hard to see how negativity, being a negative Nelly, is going to be useful at all in building someone up. Where it's just the contrary. We are ripping each other apart. We're eating our own when we park in that negative place.
This particular translation, I thought, I'm gonna just read a different translation of that verse. This is what it says: it says, "Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by those who say such things, because bad company corrupts good character."
Yep.
You know,
you think about the circles you run in. Would somebody who is negative, I mean, just views everything through an inappropriate lens, would they fit in with a group of people that are choosing to be positive?
Oh, no way.
So they wouldn't even interact with that.
Yeah.
They would choose to go where?
Where the negative's at.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's that other default that you go there. Scripture says for us to take every thought captive.
Correct.
That's a pretty hard task.
Yeah.
That is a mountain that a lot of us have to fight through. What that tells me, though, is that number one, that God doesn't dangle a carrot in front of us that we'll never achieve. He wants us to have the discipline and the daily rhythms to make sure that I'm not a victim of my own thoughts. A really cool book. I think I've mentioned here on the podcast. I would highly recommend it. It's called Winning the War in Your Mind.
It's a great book. Yep.
Oh man, I've listened to it. I've read it. I've listened again. I've read it again. I mean, there's so much truth in that. And there's things that you begin to see and go, ooh, I didn't even realize that. But there is such power in positivity. There's power in intentionality, but it goes down to, I can take every thought captive. I'm not a victim to my thought processes. One of the ways that I found extremely successful, and we've kind of modeled it in our family for this, is that we reflect on the positive things. So every night before bed, our kids, I say, okay, what is one person you're thankful for? And no matter if they've had a horrible day, their teachers yelled at them, mom and dad are mad, whatever's going on, they still have to go, I'm thankful for this kid because he did whatever. He gave me a toy on the playground, or he hung out with me. So what's one person you love? And what are two things you were thankful for? And so before bed, they think about, no matter how bad my day was, I do have three things to be thankful for. And then they go to sleep. If we do that, and if we would model that as adults, in some of my darkest times, and I should do them in even the normal times, but I would keep a thanks journal. And then a couple books that talks about the power of a thanks journal, and they correlate that to the same effective rate as counseling and even medicine. And we're fans here at Shield of both. God has given us medical doctors and psychologists to help us walk through stuff, as well as licensed counselors. And we refer out to both of those very frequently. But what they're seeing is that if you keep a thanks journal and you write down intentionally, and I take every thought captive, like Scripture says, no matter what's going on in my life, I am thankful for these things. I am hard resetting, and I'm forcing my mind. I'm doing the thing that's not easy to look at what's actually going good. Again, we're not ignoring the bad things happen.
Yep.
We're choosing to focus on the good things.
Yeah.
You celebrate the wins. You celebrate what you can. And I know an author of a parenting book we read years ago, but boundaries with kids, and it's been around for 25, 30 years now. But you find something positive in it, and sometimes it's like panning for gold is the way they would put it, because it's the negative stuff just jumps out. You don't have to work hard to find the negative in things. It's like people go there all around you, right? And especially in the departments, if you're in law enforcement, none of this is a surprise to you you're right. So the negative, you have no trouble picking up on and seeing it jumps out, it screams at you. But looking for the positive, sometimes it is like panning for gold, and you look for that little speck. But boy, when you can draw attention to that positive and hold on to that little speck of gold, that nugget that you've found, it's so impactful. And if you, as you were talking about, Gareth, modeling before your children and doing this with your children, you're setting them up you're building such good habits in their lives by doing that and setting them up for a bright future, because it's training them to then look for the good, because they know every night you are going to be asking them those questions. So throughout the day, they're going to start making note of, hey, that kid was nice to me today. My teacher went above and beyond to help me when I was struggling with something today. So we're talking about children, but it works for us too, right? If we have a thanks journal and we're using that regularly, then we're training ourselves. We're being transformed by the renewing of our mind that Scripture talks about, right? That's part of the way that works. We're training ourselves to look for those things that we can be grateful for, that are positive. And we can teach an old dog new tricks, and me being the old dog, right? We can train ourselves to look for those things that are excellent, noble, praiseworthy, and think about such things. Again, directly from Scripture in Philippians 4.
Well, and let's talk. I just kind of honed in on that word training that you were talking about just a second ago, and I began to think about that in relation to law enforcement. So, right now we're recording in the academy, and they are taught, and it's with a lot of intentionality, right? And they are learning with a lot of intentionality the things that in the beginning, everything they do has to be intentional. But the goal is by the time they continue to learn this stuff and continue to do it over and over again, it becomes second nature. So the same thing applies here, right? So if you're in a negative perspective, you initially have to start with very much an intentionality of looking for the things that are good, because you're so used to being in that negative mindset. You have to be super intentional. But what ends up happening is that intentionality pays off down the road, to then it begins making itself second nature to you. And it doesn't require as much intentionality anymore, because you have trained yourself to a point to stop being so negative and to start focusing on the things that are positive. And so again, like you said, in the instance of your kids, they know at night. So Dad's been training me every night that at night he's going to be asking me these questions. What happens eventually over time, their little minds start going as they go throughout their day, and something happens. They begin kind of picking up on those things early instead of having to think about them right when they go at the end of their day. And so a lot of correlation there, especially with the police world when you're talking training and having to learn things and become that second nature.
I was talking to a guy yesterday before we did this podcast, and obviously will remain unnamed, and their department will remain unnamed, but man, they stick out like a sore thumb because they're so positive. And it's not a false chintzy, like they don't walk around like a ray of sunshine and just totally oblivious to everything in life. They've had a pretty tenured career, pretty hard life, but they choose to be positive. And literally they stick out like a sore thumb in rooms and trainings, in lineups and their platoons. They shine. So I asked them, how did you get here? And their response to me was a little more colorful than probably we can interact with on this podcast. But in essence, what they said was, I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to show people how weak I am. And when I see people that are weak, or when I see people that are negative, he said, I automatically think that they are weak, they are undisciplined, and that is not a good battle buddy. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow. Whoa.
So what he's getting at is we have a choice.
Correct. And he excels. I mean, this is something that he has modeled well in his life. And we'll get to interview another fella that has done the same as well. But I mean, there are people, and I would say if you're struggling with this, look for someone in your life that's, man, they got that dialed in. Yeah. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to blaze my own trail. Someone that has walked in my moccasins that's getting this, ask them how they got there. And one of the things that this gentleman was saying that was so powerful was he views negativity much like the dessert table. That's the easy thing to do. Man, we can run over there.
Comparing those two things.
Yeah, we can run over there. And he said, typically people that are so negative are also undisciplined.
I'm sorry, you lost me for a minute. I was just in my head. I saw like cheesecake and like fried Oreos.
If only people could have saw the face I saw when that happened in that moment.
It was sheer hopelessness.
Yeah. I like some analogies and comparisons better than others.
That one hit too hard.
That was hard for me.
That's what they were saying. That negativity is the dessert table,
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you can discipline yourself to go, the easy thing to do is to be negative.
Yeah.
The hard thing to do is go, nope, I will not act that way. Yep. They actually said that you almost like shadow yourself or backlight yourself to the entire community that you are weak, is what they were saying.
Wow.
That was their perspective. You're putting a flashlight on yourself going, yeah, I'm weak-minded.
Well, Gareth, you mentioned a couple words at the beginning. You mentioned attitude and altitude. What in the world were you getting at with that? What's the relationship there?
So early on in my life, at a very young age, I developed a love for aviation. And one day I will hopefully finish that love and complete my pilot's license and get to experience that. But growing up, being around pilots and getting to fly and working on my pilot's license, I found this nifty meter, this gauge, this indicator that was on the dash. And there's several on an airplane. But you have literally what's called an attitude meter. And if I could show you a picture of it, I would. But I had an instructor tell me one time, your attitude affects your altitude. And it was this mind-blowing experience for me. Wherever you have your plane pitched, the attitude of your plane will always affect your altitude. So that is the reflection of where you're pointed. So if I'm pointed down, my altitude will go down. If I'm pointed up, my altitude will go up. And sometimes you can't feel it in an airplane. It's the craziest thing. You cannot feel. I remember the first time I ever flew through a cloud. I always hear these pilots that forgot they were flying normal and went upside down and all this crazy stuff. I'm like, man, what happened here? I remember the first time I flew through a cloud and I couldn't see anything. I was like, sweet mercy, this is how we all die. You lose every reference from everything around you. And I think negativity is much like that. You enter this situation where you don't have any gauge of relativity and truth, and you're just in that moment. And so your attitude will always affect your altitude. And so you have a meter right in front of you that tells you that. And so I've tried to apply that to my life and to look at other people's lives and go, where I want to be is my attitude. Is that reflecting that?
That's good. That's so good. And it's interesting that you mentioned you were just drawing that comparison to the negativity being a cloud and so if we don't have a negativity gauge right in front of us, but do we? Maybe we do. Can we not look at others when we're talking, when we're speaking, and what you were talking about early on, we kind of have that meter that we can look at. If what we are saying is feeding more negativity, then clearly we're the ones we're taking us down a negative road. And again, it's so easy because oftentimes, in law enforcement circles, y'all are hilarious.
It's funny.
It really is funny. And I mean, I've been guilty as well. Things get negative and it's done in such a funny way. It's so easy, even for a chaplain to jump in with that. It takes a conscious decision to say, you know what, I'm not.
Pull up.
Yep. Pull up.
It's easy to ride that plane down.
We need to live above that. We need to do better. Because eventually, now obviously all analogies break down at some point. There comes a time you got to safely land the plane. But if your nose is just pointed down, if you're like, I'm no pilot, but bad things happen when you are doing a nosedive.
I tell you what that looks like. That nosedive will end you when if God allows you to live to that 70, 80-year-old time frame. You've experienced people 100% that have allowed negativity to rule their life. And when they get to that golden years of their life, they're the most lonely, miserable, backbiting, evil, and snarling people that you'll ever meet.
Yep.
That's what that looks like. So,
or they're just broken.
Oh, man.
Because they realize, later in life that, wow, I have literally, because of my negativity, I've pushed away. Who wants to be around that?
Nope.
It does, I am not going to name names, but I pastored churches for 23 years before I stepped into law enforcement chaplaincy full time with SHIELD. And man, there's just some people, right? You just didn't want to ask them how they were doing, because you knew for the next hour they're going to share every negative thing that's going on or has gone on in their lives. And you're just trying to make conversation. It's like, so there's some people you never ask that question of. You'd find a different way to start a conversation or that kind of thing, because
so that brings up something. We've talked a lot about introspective, like if we realize, probably could do a little better at that. And I would say that most law enforcement officers that are listening to this now could use a little improvement in this area. By and large, that is what we're seeing. Typically, our officers don't struggle with too much positivity, and people are complaining about, like, man, you're just overjoyous today. They typically struggle with the opposite. But let's say that you're dialing in this area. You're getting honed in. You're making some traction, but you notice somebody else is struggling with that. There needs to be an open door for you, obviously, to talk about that as a battle buddy. You need to help that. But that scenario you were talking about, one of the ways that breaks that negativity and it breaks that cord is you begin to compliment that person.
Yep.
And sometimes it's pitiful. I went and told a supervisor the other day, I said, hey, I was actually riding with this person, and they told me I could tell you this, but they are where they're at today because you stood up for them. Thank you for doing that. And this supervisor said, in all of my career, I've never heard that one time. They said, no one has ever given me a positive feedback for fighting for them. And so I pressed in. I said, so you've never, ever had somebody compliment your leadership. And they said, you will never get complimented as a supervisor, is what their words to me were. Well, that person is negative and they're experiencing negativity and no one's helping them. So a really cool tool is there is a lot of bad that's going on. And we've talked about this. There's a lot of bad supervision that's going on. We don't have to pretend it's not there. Why don't you compliment something that's good?
Yes.
Your wife is crazy good at this. She will step into situations and just breathe life. Hey, I see that you're doing well at this. Keep doing that. And that is so life-giving to people. And oftentimes you don't even know what to do with it because you're not used to that. You're negative. All the feedback you're getting is negative. And someone says, hey, I saw you succeed at that. That's really awesome. Keep doing it. That could be life-changing to people.
It really is. So it's, again, I keep on going back to children because, every moment with a child is a teachable moment. Literally every moment of every day as a parent that you're around your kids, you are teaching them, whether you are intentional about it or not, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's something good or something bad. You are, every moment of every day that you are around your children, you are teaching them. It's the same way. Like, we're just big kids, and you have an impact on the people around you, whether you realize it or not. And so, just as I am talking with young fathers, and encouraging them to be as quick to compliment their kids and to affirm those positive things in their kids as they are pointing out the negative things. We can do just what you said with each other. When we see something good, when we see it, and again, sometimes it's panning for that speck of gold, that speck of gold dust. But when we see, whether it be a supervisor, or whether it be command staff, or someone, on the patrol level with us, or a civilian employee in the department, when we see somebody doing something good and positive, or excelling at something or whatever, draw attention to that. And it's amazing that it's that principle of sowing and reaping, right? Like, give away what you want to receive, like, or how, there's so many different ways to say it. What you feed is going to grow. If you feed the positivity, you'll see more of that. And what would happen if a couple of people on each shift, a couple of people in each platoon would decide, you know what, let's do this. It's so easy to go negative. Let's be the ones who highlight what is good and positive. And let's start drawing attention to those things. Let's do this. Let's try this for the next month. That we are going to find those things that are excellent, noble, praiseworthy, and affirm those things in each other. I wonder what kind of impact that might have.
Let's start today.
Yeah.
If you're listening to it right now, think of one person that you can compliment and say, thank you for blank. I see that you do blank well. I admire this about you. I respect this about you. That's free. It's not over the top. It's not going to take much time. Send them a text. Call them.
Yeah.
When is the last time that you have done that to your spouse? If we had a time frame on that, when is the last time you said, and we can always look at the negative of our spouse. Man, they don't do this. Man, they used to do this. And those all may be true. They may be 100% factual. You may not be making anything up. But when have you said, hey, thank you for blank?
Yep.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So do that today. Find one person. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to text somebody. And I challenge you guys to do the same. Text somebody, call someone, do it.
That's good stuff. It's powerful. And the amazing thing is, it's like a spoiler alert here. As you begin to do that, not only will you be encouraging someone else and maybe just make their day, right? And encourage them for that moment. The change in you is going to be amazing.
Yep.
I remember when we did this, the FBI, the National Academy stuff, we were doing this section on gratitude, and we were talking about resiliency and the different things. And we got to the section on gratitude. And one of the things we did is we wrote a letter to somebody who had spoken into our life, shaped us in some way. We wrote this letter, right? That's part of the exercise. And then we were challenged to, that night, we were challenged to call that person. If we couldn't sit down with them, to call them. If the person was no longer alive, the closest person to them, call them and either just read the letter or share the content of that letter and tell the person what you meant to them. And when the men and women in that class came back in, it was incredible the impact it had on them, on us when we took the time to do that. And so it may sound a little corny, it may feel a little awkward, but do it. Just give it a shot.
You never know how it'll change people. I know my wife and I have had a thing we've done for years at restaurants. It's not necessarily within the police world, but restaurants, nobody ever asks for the waitress's manager unless there's something wrong going on. So we've tried to make it a habit when we have a good waitress, we ask to speak to the manager. And she's usually like, deer's and eyes are like deer headlight moment. She's worried something's wrong. And we just really want to tell our manager, look, so probably nobody says anything to you about this girl unless she does something wrong. We just want to tell you she's doing it right, to give them an opportunity to say, again, to bring positivity and to encourage her, rather than her being torn down on by somebody who wasn't necessarily happy they didn't get a drink refill fast enough.
And I know this from experience. How many times have you done that and you see relief
absolutely
on the face of the manager,
man.
right?
Yeah, completely.
Or if you're at a store, that customer service rep or whatever, you see this just relief come over their face. It's like, oh, good. It's not somebody complaining about something. It's not, something negative. Like, wow, thank you for that. I will pass that along.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we've talked about a lot, and I'm excited for next week.
Yeah.
Next week, we get to hear from someone who is battling this on the front lines, right?
Yep.
Somebody that is serving in one of our local departments that has been willing to say, I've fallen victim to this. This has affected me and my family, and here's what we're doing to correct that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I am positive that you're going to want to listen in next week.
Look
for
at
sure.
you being positive.
Yeah.
See, what a turn. What a change.
Uh-huh.
I started off with this episode being so negative, and because of your smiling faces, your compliments, and doing this podcast with you, you've turned me around in one episode.
I'm
Good job, guys.
I've got an idea.
Yeah.
Let's go celebrate with Mission Barbecue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm positive that's going to be a good experience.
Feels like a spirit-filled decision.
Yeah. And we'll put a plug in for them. If you need good food that supports good things, go to Mission Barbecue.
I tell you what.
I will say, in light of all this, I am thankful for Mission Barbecue.
Me too, man.
They, anytime we have a critical incident, they will call or text one of us and say, what can we do to help?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
It's amazing. And I'm going to keep it positive, but I will say I've been called at 3:30 in the morning. They were so eager to help. Called me at 3:30 in the morning, ready to pull the trigger on supplying some food and doing some good things. And I was like, oh boy.
And that was 15 minutes before you normally woke up. So.
Yeah, I know.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I know. No, they are incredible, and we're so grateful for them. And listen, you men and women, we genuinely care about you. I know you got 3 chaplains here doing this episode, but we genuinely care about you, and we're not sitting here as people who have perfected this thing, as I've stated earlier. We want you to be at your best for you. We want you to be at your best for your families, and we want you to be at your best in the departments that you are serving and the communities that you are serving in. And part of that is learning to be more positive. And each one of you can make a difference in your departments, on your shifts, in your platoons. Each one of you listening to this can have a positive impact and make a positive difference in your workplace. And it just takes a conscious decision, a little bit of effort on your part. And I'm excited to see what's going to come out of this.
Yes, I'll just kind of tail end off of that with what my counselor often says to me whenever we talk. And he always, when I see him, he'll hold his 2 hands up, and on his left side he'll say, "This is what you can't do," and on his right side he'll say, "This is what you can do. Focus on what you can do. Don't focus on what you can't do." And what you can do is you can bring a different perspective, and you can bring positivity. You don't have to feed into the negativity. You can't control everybody else's negativity, but you can surely control yours.
That's it.
So focus on what you can control. So thanks so much for joining, guys. Great conversation today. This is a great lead into what's coming up with our next episode and our interview that's coming. We're looking forward to that, and we sure hope that you'll join us back because you're going to want to hear it. You guys have a great week. We'll see you soon.